This is called Each of Us, and like many of my poems, it has an epigraph from the New York Times. The epigraph is, by the time it is done growing, there are about 1 billion water molecules in a typical snowflake, Dr. Librecht says. And on average, he calculates, each of us on Earth has contributed by exhalation and evaporation about 1,000 of the molecules in each snowflake. And that's from the New York Times, December 23rd, 2003. Each of us. We are all here in these eyelashes of flakes, zinging at our faces over and over, our loves requited and not, the joyful young man I wrote to the year after college, and Trisha, who said, I fell in love with a Japanese woman making teeth, and the man who tried to record all the shapes of all the clouds ever, and the man who felt sentenced to life, accused of abusing a child, because killing himself would appear an admission of guilt. Here's the woman who wrote the slogan, cat bathing made easy, and the nurse who said of newborns, they're all cartilage. I see Ella like a carousel horse, impaled on her fear, lurching forward a bit, inevitably retreating. I want her to break free of whatever darkness constrains her. I see the drunk woman who called me 3 times at 1 a.m., demanding to talk to Joey in Kansas. And here's the owner of a diamond lost on the Broadway sidewalk. Here's the dad who says, smile and say pumpernickel before taking a picture. And here's the man whose eyes were so dark no one could see his pupils. There is a child who would hold his mother's earlobe if he got sleepy, and those newlyweds who fit together like notes and measures. I notice a few atoms from the man who sprayed his late wife's perfume on his pillow before he went to bed, the only way he could sleep, and the guy who wrote a poem starring the moon without the moon in it, and M's friend who wrote a song, Sorry I Did That in Your Dream. Here's the 98-year-old woman born with wrinkled hands. The doctor guessed she'd had all her troubles in a previous life. Looking back, she agreed. And a man who wanted his ashes put in a figurehead of a ship, thinking the bowsprit's the best place for traveling the ocean for the rest of time. Thousands of molecules melt on me, including saints and my late grandmothers. Look up, mouth open. Take them in, a cold, wet Eucharist. This one is about dogs and also has an epigraph from the New York Times, from Science Times, which is my favorite section of the paper. It reads, when 2 species live together for a long time, each usually influences the genetically conferred qualities of the other. People may have selected preferred abilities in the dog, but dogs too may have fostered their favorite qualities in people, not of course deliberately, but simply by giving people who use dogs better chance of surviving than people who did not. The New York Times, November 22nd, 2002. It's called Dogged. The ones who could spare a scrap, ones who loved ear velvet, those who were tired of picking up crumbs and didn't mind a tongue, are you one of them from generations ago? Did your great-to-the-greats-grandmother refuse the men who kicked the dogs, that cleaned the carcass, and kept away flies and rats and fleas and plagues? Maybe a hound found your toddling grandpa after he wandered off in a late cold fog. Of course, those with watchdogs woke up before the bears ate them, and they lived on to have more children than the ones who didn't. Soon, the experienced stick thrower became the skilled spear thrower. The frequent rump scratcher enjoyed lower blood pressure and longer life. Those who spooned with sleeping dogs lived warmer in skin tents. Think of the sheep, oh, the lamb dinners and cabled sweaters, attributable to Rover. But it goes further. We learned the break-its-neck headshake, seen so often in business meetings, where we practice sitting, giving pause, and staying. We whistled well, fetched, retrieved. Our canine roots explain our best salesmen, graduate students, suitors. Not for nothing we call them dogged. So when I say, oh my goodness, that goodness is shaggy, nudged ancestrally by the wagging tail, the beseeching eyes, the nose flipping the forearm of the hand that holds the newspaper. I forget who taught me and mine to lie on our backs with feet kicking. Dog lovers excel at tug of war and learn to chew hard on what leashes us in. We are less asthmatic, take thoughtful walks. We romp more, mope less. The benefits of caring for all old dogs continue down through the helixes into a kinder future. We know that the shawl of the howl keeps us warm. The poem is called To Yahweh, and the quote is, YHWH is definitely a verb form. We can take comfort in the certain knowledge that God is a verb, not a noun or an adjective. This one appeared in the Best American Poetry of 2009. God is the spray on your lip from the freshly poured ginger ale. No, God is the arrival on your lip of the spray, the arcing, the spree. God is definitely not that weird sexuality of wild bird rehabilitators. God is, instead, waves blown back hard from the shore at night. Perhaps he is the rumbling scaring done by the haunted freight train, the shrill ghouls in the back cars climbing over each other to escape. God is weak-washing, the spearing of eels or fish from a canoe by torchlight. God is the inventing of words like weak-washing. She is not the fire darkening down. She is the goldfinch singing the whisper song, and the birthing of a second child, to feel your body blooming, to feel head, shoulders, thighs, then cord tumbling, to live, to life, to give the initial downbeat to the timpani, to cure mice by placing them in a cello, to do whatever the scarecrow did with his brains, and to make that acrid or burned quality of the smell of space, to crow, to fly, to gild and gnaw, to mean, shape, shear, smear and shine, play and improvise, to last. That one reminds me of The Wizard of Oz because of the scarecrow. And I have a poem here that was inspired by my daughter, who is now 12. And in the back, when she was 2.5, she could have watched The Wizard of Oz on infinite loop, basically. I found it quite disturbing, especially the flying monkeys, but she liked the flying monkeys in particular. So this poem is called Calling Up Dorothy, after the 19th viewing of The Wizard of Oz with my 2-year-old. She handed me the phone and told me to call Dorothy. There are no D. Gales listed in Kansas, so Kate guessed at the number. Yes, hello? I suspect that a mind that could create such a dream world would have had a bright future. So how did you turn out? Were your later relationships harmed by the early and unexplained disappearance of those closest, or by the serious head injury? What happened to that whole milk sadness of Over the Rainbow, the homesickness of the teenager whose parents aren't in the picture? Kate wants to know, how's Toto? Did you survive his long ago loss? Did you ever see an ocean, or have kids, or tell them about your adventures? Did anything as interesting as Oz ever happen again? Any similar hours where the lessons arrived so compact and perfect at the end? Did your longing for something happier and more colorful lead you to real-life yellow brick, or lions and tigers and bears? Did you surrender? Did your troubles melt or harden and hurt? Did you live learning the inevitability of corn smut and corn rot in a small home that, no matter how you cleaned, smelled like a vacuum bag? When you rode soft swerving on dirt roads at night, did your bicycle remind you of the tornado? What other twisters did you ride? A local election campaign? a husband accused of molestation, a son at war, a depressed daughter. I see a husband, a real cubic zirconium in the rough, more cowardly than lion, tin than man, scared than crow. Is the wife a kite trapped in a tree with just enough string to bash and heave against what holds her? No, it's better than that. She grew surrounded by a loving aunt and uncle, remember? Good people. She loves home. She likes the nicknames her grandchildren picked for her. Ages ago, she stopped with the why then oh whining, quit smoking in the 80s. Each year, she gives to 20 charities, all weather related. She is always crocheting something, and she laughs in her sleep. I'm going to read from the Gospel of Galore. It has a little gold sticker on it because it won a Washington State Book Award. I was eligible for that because I lived in Washington State when many of these poems were written. So I'm going to start off with the first poem in the collection, which also has an epigraph, this time from a real person. It's called Instructions from the Choir Director, and its epigraph is a quote from composer and music director Fred West, November 1996. He was the choir director in my church. The voice isn't an instrument that has buttons or keys to press, but you can control it with images. If you raise your hand at the end of a note, that in itself keeps the note from going flat. We start together by inhaling together, picturing quickly how the cherry trees hold their petals suspended above the ground. And we start together, aiming together, 6-ball in the corner pocket, using the cue of his agile downbeat. When we sing slowly, we sing of the spread of mosses and liverworts over the rocks from lakes, up the hills, andante across the continents. When we sing sforzando, we imagine a sun so bright and sudden it makes ours cast a shadow. We learn deep breaths for the long whole notes and lie back and think of England. For pianissimo, he tells us of his beloved, who breathes so quietly at night you can't hear her. During the old hymns, we picture fireworks, but fireworks without the grand finale. As for the solo vibrato, he reminds me with his left hand of poplars in the still air, the embodiment of applause. I think of Julie Andrews thinking of chocolate mousse, Paul Simon contemplating the smooth grind of earth on its axis, Billie Holiday awash in returned letters. Perhaps those high Baroque tenors ponder frying on a spit, and overblown sopranos memorize the garish, decrepit tulip the day before the petals drop. For intonation, there's the Cheshire cat, how it feels itself folded into harmony with the air just before evaporating. For elegant polish, he tells us the story of singing Gloria up at Lake Serene at sunrise on the longest day of the year. Do not think of the dull thud of the cracked plate placed on the table. Avoid, he tells us, any glance to the flowers on the altar, the unfortunate dissonance of the daisy's stale smell. And for the men, think of cinching the last loop, and for the amen, think of cinching the last loop in signing a marriage certificate. Think of the unity implied on the tombstone that reads, "Children, come look, the mountain is out." This one is called Emily Believes, and for once it doesn't have an epigraph. Emily believes people become like the bodies of water they grew up near. I think she's right. Harry, for instance, lived on the Sound, swung by tides, forever testing himself. How near to the shore can he jump off the tall pier? Can he jump by that nail 20 feet up? Is he a nailer? Is the tide sufficiently high? Can he measure his affection for Lois? Is it enough? My old Michael was raised under 2 feet of snow by the river that stopped for weeks on end. He was solid and challenging, buoying me for some seasons, but I never understood his hyperrheic zones, which means the zones of land under a lake. his currents, his eddies. Sophia, on the other hand, is a pool woman. Her home smells of bleach. She has the clear sight of looking up at the surface through goggles, that brightness beyond reality. She moves fast, though constrained by thick black lines and concrete. M, having been brought up near Coney Island, knew from the start that her love for West Texas West was doomed. And Paul grew up too many places, but took with him the irrigation ditch through a lonely land made fruitful, and the frogs in the marsh, peeping like chanting swings, squeaking, sometimes in sync, most often not. Ryan was raised near no water, and look at him, dry as a communion wafer. For wetness, he relied on the clouds coming down, and he spent months waiting for rainbows in the clear blue sky. He once saw one. He knows that most of a partridge's liquid intake is in the form of dew. A corner of his soul is parched, but he is at peace with that. For several months in 1994, I seriously considered running off with the man who grew up next to the abandoned gold mine. He took me there and warned me of the winces, the shafts of water that hide beneath the rails, beneath the rotten ties. Believing every altar should have a door of darkness, no one knowing where it leads, I found him to be a soulmate, but too dangerous. So it is fitting that Pete, his fingerprints dark on my morning blueberries, his kiss smooth as the inside of a split almond, his laughter quiet but consistent, spent all his summers on the lake. I have learned I am a brook person, forever trying to catch up with my heart. Only after all this can I see how you, my tiny beloved, my unborn child, are a dewdrop on a lupine leaf, magnifying glass bright. This is called Immaculate. He took me to the New World. He wanted privacy. Perhaps he didn't want people fighting over the exact spot. It is near Akron, where cherry trees bloomed wild. He seemed at first just a silhouette, a driver in a luxury car commercial, and he spoke like an anchorman. I was surprised he had hands, but he did. He arrived like a 2-year-old running among a flock of feeding pigeons. There was this phenomenal rising of ryegrass, of seeds, of the sound of spring peepers. The sun turned glamorous, like overhead lights on a transatlantic flight. I can give approximations, defibrillation by sudden starlight, veins on petals of a trillium, rolling in hot laundry. It was mostly by talking, not flattery, not steaminess. Talk of tenderness and honor, courage, love that grows from root to highest air. Holy orgasm sounds like sunrise. I remember how his head tilted a bit, and he smiled, and he was precise, the choir director cutting off a note and smiling again. I still see him. If I drive along next to railroad tracks on sunny days, the threading light traveling with me is my beloved. This is called Toward a Theology Based on Labrador Retrievers. I am arguing in the affirmative that the Creator moves among us today in Brooklyn in the form of a black dog named Addie. Her benevolence is deeper than the farthest foxhole, her gentleness thick as husky fur. Were she human, she would sort and fold strangers' laundry at the laundromat. Were she only a dog, she would not fetch without being asked. There is abundance in her, like the butterfly laying its eggs mid-air. Bountiful and democratic is her spirit. She licks my hand like a spa treatment. She sleeps, calm back, flat by my flank, breathing like a separate sea. She dreams of the squirrel's flicking, scolding tail, its visible neener, neener, neener. Her vengeance is quick and awful. Yet love of fellowship runs in her blood, her song like the birds that is only heard among other birds. She has taught me the help given to the soul by the mile-wide lawn dotted with trees, by the tossed scrap. I believe in her greetings, In the wide maple way she roams from one scent to another. Bury me in this part of the park where the dogs run without leashes. Mix my ashes with hers. Shield us in her joy, O protector, O caller. Let her true heart be contagious. I had a friend who had a dog somewhat like that they had nicknamed Jesus in a dog suit, which I thought was a pretty good name. This other one about her is called Now That My Dog's Human. For years, she had pulled on my attention, undeveloped film waiting in a camera. Now Addie is a lively second-grade teacher who drives a red pickup. She puts her whole self in, puts her whole self out. She has those same eyes like my dead uncle's, almost Welsh, upward turning, beseeching, worried, watching a muddy sea, considerate. We're easy together. We have the loose fit of second-day socks. I'm big sister, not boss. I taught her the geography of a bubble bath, the plain joy of getting clean in the morning. She taught me to eat faster, lie on the sunny part of the rug, approach sleeping strangers in the park. She won't renounce the taste of tennis ball. She's lost her otherness, most of it. It fell off easy like a ripe berry. She catches peanuts in her mouth expertly. And I ask her, what did I do in those electric foot dreams? And what was she thinking when she came when I called, all hunkered down and avid? Her ears still perk up at the tiny click of my smile. It's called The Quiet Alert Period. And it has an epigraph from Pregnancy, Childbirth, and the Newborn, The Complete Guide by Peggy Simpkin, which says, your baby lies still and looks at you calmly with bright, wide eyes. She breathes with regularity and focuses attentively on what she sees and hears. Take time to enjoy these moments of eye contact, alertness, and calm. In Prospect Park, the only plant flowering now is witch hazel. In the maternity ward, they gave us pads soaked in it to soothe our bottoms, such a civilized nursery school name for the most sexual parts, the first phrase we learn in the language of mommy. The ground lies dormant, the grass the color of a stuffed lion's fur. It's all incipience, like my tiny Kate, all potential, all blooming, waiting beneath the surface. Sparse hair throws shadows on her skin, like trees in their first leaf, seen from the air. She curves in on herself, a tight fern frond, then flings cotyledon arms when she startles and stretches. Then, quiet, with her eyes open, she lets the room pour into her, rain falling in, light raining down, the eyes blue moons wider than full. Each day a new seedling appears, hairs on her brow line, syllables upon waking. The cord falls off, the smell of mud rises. Soon, spring dawn, first smile. And it is called Cat Sense. Pretend you don't know I'm coming. And so it begins. Kate, 3 3/4, meows plaintively. She's suddenly a kitty, no longer a displaced only child, recent big sister. A hungry, dirty, cold kitty whose parents died 2 days ago, who has since been living in a hotel of unknown caliber. Our cat catechism proceeds. Don't you have any friends? No. Or grandparents? No. Aunts, uncles, siblings? No. Meow. Would you like me to adopt you and raise you as my own, and you could have my last name, if the judge says it's okay? Which of course he does, and I give her a palmful of pretend milk, pretend kitten chow, and a bath, licking my palm, then stroking her hair. It's the most cuddling she has allowed me in weeks. Grandma is right. It would have taken thousands of dollars in therapy to create anything that gives her as much solace as the born kitty game, and puts her in the center of a new universe, at peace with her brother. Grandma is right that they teach you how to raise them if you listen and purr and hold them in your arms, but only if they let you. And Kate is right, inside the logic of her own world at least, to take our charity lesson a step further. Maybe we could find a poor family who doesn't have a baby, and we could give them Drew. Come here, doll, let me hug you instead. Thank you.